What if I told you that Vikings were growing vegetables that required absolutely zero maintenance? No weeding, no watering, no replanting, while modern gardeners slave away every weekend. These Norse warriors cultivated 16 remarkable plants that returned year after year or reseeded themselves, providing endless food without any work. Today, we're rediscovering these set-it-and-forget-it crops that prove Vikings were the ultimate lazy gardeners. Ground elder, Agopodium podagraria, the unstoppable survivor. Let's start with the vegetable that modern gardeners spend fortunes trying to kill, completely unaware they're destroying one of the most reliable food sources Vikings ever cultivated. Ground elder Agopodium podagraria was intentionally grown in Viking settlements from Norway to Iceland, and archaeological evidence from medieval Bergen proves this wasn't accidental. It was strategic food security. Today, we call it bishop's weed or goutweed, and it appears on every list of invasive garden pests requiring immediate destruction. But Vikings knew this perennial with compound leaves as a dependable potherb that provided vitamin-rich greens throughout the entire growing season, without any human intervention whatsoever. What made ground elder absolutely perfect for zero-maintenance gardening was its aggressive spreading habit. Modern gardeners see this as a problem, but Vikings recognized it as a solution. Plant it once, and it spreads through underground rhizomes, creating an ever-expanding food source that requires zero replanting, zero watering, and zero fertilizing. It's essentially nature's way of offering free groceries, and we're too stubborn to accept the gift. Vikings consumed the young leaves raw or cooked them like spinach. The plant grows rapidly, tolerates frost, and contains abundant vitamins A and C. Medieval doctors valued ground elder specifically for treating gout, which explains its Latin name, podagraria, literally foot pain. Vikings understood that this plant prevented nutritional deficiencies, while requiring absolutely no gardening work beyond containing its spread. The plant demands no cultivation beyond managing where it grows. For communities that needed guaranteed food security without constant labor, ground elder was perfect. Modern agriculture has declared war on this nutritious plant with chemical herbicides, while we simultaneously pay premium prices for organic spinach and kale at grocery stores. Ground elder is the ultimate revenge plant. We tried to kill it, but it just keeps coming back, offering free nutrition while we're too proud to take the hint. Dandelion, Taraxacum officinale, the perennial superfood weed. Next comes the vegetable that proves modern agriculture has completely lost its mind. Dandelion Taraxacum officinale is one of the most nutritious plants on the planet, and Vikings recognized it as valuable food and medicine. Today, we spend billions trying to eliminate it from our lawns, while simultaneously buying expensive supplements that provide the same nutrients dandelions offer for free. This herbaceous perennial is native to temperate Eurasia and has been used medicinally and as food for thousands of years. By the 10th century, Arabs were cultivating dandelions extensively for medical treatments, and archaeological evidence suggests Vikings were familiar with this plant's nutritional and medicinal properties. What made dandelion absolutely perfect for zero-maintenance Viking gardens was that it required no cultivation whatsoever. It simply grew everywhere without any human help. The entire plant is edible. Leaves are eaten raw or cooked in salads, flowers are used to make wine or eaten fresh, and roots are roasted for tea or consumed as vegetables. Vikings consumed dandelion leaves as early spring greens, providing essential vitamins after long winters of preserved foods. The roots were dug in fall and used medicinally or as food. Modern nutritional analysis reveals why dandelions were so valuable. The leaves contain more vitamin A than carrots, more calcium than milk, and more iron than spinach, pound for pound. The plant is a perennial that spreads through both deep taproots and wind-dispersed seeds, creating permanent populations that return year after year without any planting or maintenance. Vikings had figured out that this weed was actually a superfood that provided superior nutrition without any gardening work. The deep taproot mines minerals from deep in the soil, concentrating nutrients that shallow-rooted vegetables can't access. We've declared war on dandelions, spending billions on herbicides to eliminate what Vikings considered valuable food and medicine. Meanwhile, we pay premium prices for supplements and superfoods that provide the same nutrients dandelions offer for free in every yard and vacant lot. It's possibly the most absurd example of modern agriculture's disconnect from practical food security. Watercress, Nasturtium officinale, the perennial stream garden. Now let's discuss a plant that proves Vikings understood hydroponic gardening centuries before modern agriculture discovered it. Watercress nasturtium officinale was cultivated in the shallow streams and wet areas around Viking settlements, essentially creating the world's first aquaculture vegetable systems that maintain themselves without any human intervention. This succulent perennial plant grows naturally in clean, flowing water, and Vikings recognized its value as a reliable source of fresh greens that could be harvested throughout the growing season. Archaeological evidence from water management systems at Viking settlements shows they deliberately channeled streams through their communities, creating perfect growing conditions for watercress and other water-loving plants. The thick, fleshy leaves have a sharp, peppery flavor similar to garden cress and are loaded with vitamin C and minerals absorbed directly from flowing water. Vikings consumed watercress raw as a scurvy preventative or added it to soups and stews for both nutrition and flavor. Medieval physicians recognized watercress as a blood purifier and prescribed it for skin conditions, understanding that its high mineral content provided medicinal benefits beyond basic nutrition. What made this plant particularly valuable for zero-maintenance cultivation was its ability to grow in conditions where soil-based vegetables couldn't survive. Watercress is a perennial that roots easily at stem nodes wherever it contacts water, essentially spreading itself through streams and creating expanding colonies without any planting from gardeners. The plant essentially functioned as a natural water filter, concentrating nutrients from streams while providing Vikings with fresh vegetables, even during harsh weather when garden plants failed. Modern hydroponic systems attempt to replicate what Vikings achieved naturally with watercress, growing nutrient-dense vegetables in water-based systems. We've invested millions in developing technology to do what Norse settlers accomplished with simple stream management and plant selection, creating self-maintaining vegetable systems that required zero work. Enjoying raiding the past with us? Then consider using YouTube's new feature and hype this video. It really helps a small channel like mine get more views and allows me to create more content. To hype the video, on your mobile device swipe left on the comment preview carousel until the option to hype the video surfaces, or tap and the carousel will change to show the option to hype. Your support helps a ton. Now back to the Viking vegetables that literally grew themselves. Stinging nettle. Urtica dioica, the perennial multivitamin. Next comes a plant so important to Vikings that they buried nettle seeds with their dead, proving this vegetable was valued enough to take into the afterlife. The famous Oseberg burial, one of the most significant Viking archaeological sites, included nettle seeds among precious grave goods. That's how crucial Urtica dioica was to Norse culture. When cooked or dried, nettles lose their sting and become one of the most nutritious greens on the planet. They're loaded with iron, calcium, and vitamins, essentially providing a complete multivitamin supplement that grows wild everywhere without any human help. Vikings used them like spinach for soups and made medicinal teas that provided both nutrition and healing compounds. What made nettle perfect for zero-maintenance Viking gardens was its incredible reliability and hardiness. This perennial plant is extremely easy to grow. Actually, it's harder to stop from growing than to cultivate. It provides early spring greens when nothing else is available and continues producing through the growing season. The plant survives harsh winters that kill other vegetables, returning vigorously each spring from deep underground roots. Medieval physicians recognized nettle's cooling properties and used it for skin irritations, while nettle tea was prescribed for fever and inflammation. Vikings understood both the nutritional and medicinal value of this abundant plant that required no cultivation or special care. Modern nutritional analysis confirms what Vikings knew instinctively. Nettles contain more protein than most leafy greens, plus exceptional levels of minerals that prevent anemia and bone loss. Modern people spend money on vitamin supplements, while this superfood grows wild in backyards, vacant lots, and forest edges. Nettles are basically nature's way of offering free medicine and nutrition, but most people are too afraid of a minor sting to accept the gift. Vikings had figured out that a little temporary discomfort during harvest was worth a lifetime of free, superior nutrition. Good King Henry, Blightum bonus, Henricus, the three-course perennial. Here comes the vegetable that proves Vikings never wasted garden space on single-purpose crops. Good King Henry Blightum bonus Henricus was called poor man's asparagus. but it was actually richer in nutrients than the expensive vegetables we purchase today. This perennial from the goosefoot family provided 3 separate harvests from a single plant without any replanting. The plant delivered asparagus-like shoots in spring that were blanched and eaten as a delicacy. Through summer, the succulent leaves were used like spinach in soups and stews. Even the flower buds were edible when boiled, giving Viking families multiple harvests from a plant that returned every year without any work. Medieval sources describe it as being prized through the Middle Ages, before virtually disappearing from cultivation by the 20th century. What made good King Henry perfect for Viking settlements was that it returned every year without replanting and tolerated poor soil conditions that would kill modern vegetables. It was the ultimate lazy gardener's dream: plant once and harvest for decades. The plant is high in vitamins A and C and easy to propagate from seed or root division, though once established, it requires absolutely no maintenance. Recent studies have revealed that good King Henry contains 3 times more omega-3 fatty acids than iceberg lettuce, and significant amounts of iron and vitamin C. Vikings were getting superior nutrition from a plant that required virtually no maintenance once established. The deep taproot mines nutrients from deep in the soil, meaning the plant actually improves garden fertility while producing food. We abandoned this reliable perennial for annual vegetables that need replanting every year, constant care, and perfect growing conditions. It's like canceling a subscription service that delivers exactly what you need and choosing to manually reorder the same thing every month at higher prices. Vikings had figured out that perennial vegetables were the key to food security without endless labor. Skirret, Sium cicerum, the plant it and forget it investment. Next comes the vegetable that proves Vikings mastered patience far better than any modern gardener. Skirret Sium cicerum was essentially the Viking equivalent of a long-term investment account, except instead of accumulating money, it delivered sweet, fibrous roots that tasted superior to anything available at today's markets. Vikings knew this plant as krumbot, or gera, and it represented the ultimate set-it-and-forget-it crop. While contemporary gardeners pamper their vegetables with continuous watering, pristine soil conditions, and temperature-controlled environments, Skirret simply performed its magic underground without complaint. You established it once, and these sweet white roots expanded year after year without requiring any assistance from you. What made Skirret genuinely extraordinary was the flavor profile. These slender white roots were naturally sweeter than carrots or parsnips, so delectable that medieval aristocracy insisted on them in their royal gardens. Archaeological evidence demonstrates that while direct Viking-era discoveries are scarce, early medieval documentation confirms this plant was treasured throughout northern Europe. The roots contained abundant starch and natural sugars, featuring pinnate green foliage and extensive taproots that could penetrate deep into soil for nutrients. Vikings consumed skirret both raw and cooked, frequently sweetening it with honey to create what amounted to medieval confectionery. The roots could be boiled, roasted, or transformed into sweet delicacies that made harsh winter dining tolerable. What made it especially precious was its dependability during severe Nordic winters, when other crops completely failed. By the 18th century, we had discarded this cold, hardy champion for potatoes, which demanded ideal conditions and constant monitoring. It's like exchanging a dependable work truck that starts every morning for a luxury vehicle that malfunctions every winter. It was labor-intensive to harvest and produced lower yields than modern crops, but it provided something far more valuable: guaranteed food security in an unpredictable climate, with absolutely zero maintenance required during the growing season. Lovage, Levisticum officinale, the decades-long flavor factory. Now let's discuss a plant that proves Vikings understood long-term planning better than most modern investors. Lovage Levisticum officinale was the Vikings' secret weapon for transforming bland food into something extraordinary, and a single plant could provide seasoning and medicine for 20 years or more without any maintenance. This towering perennial herb provided celery-like flavoring that was 10 times more potent than anything available today. The plant was likely brought north by medieval monks and quickly became a staple in Viking-era gardens because it solved a critical problem: how to add intense flavor to preserved foods without constant replanting or care. Vikings used the leaves and young stems as seasoning in soups, stews, and broths, understanding that the flavor was so concentrated that one sprig could enhance an entire pot of food. Medieval sources describe lovage as both a culinary herb and a digestive aid, recognizing its medicinal properties alongside its flavoring capabilities. What made Lovage absolutely perfect for zero-maintenance gardening was its incredible hardiness and multi-purpose nature. This plant grows over 6 feet, 1.8 meters tall, and lives for decades while providing massive amounts of seasoning from very little garden space. The deep roots actually mine nutrients from deep in the soil, improving garden fertility while producing food. It's the rare plant that makes your garden better while feeding your family, all without any work from the gardener. Monastery records from the 13th century describe Lovage as a remedy for troubles of the stomach and kidney complaints, showing that medieval herbalists understood its medicinal applications. A single Lovage plant could provide a family with seasoning and medicine for 20 years or more, requiring nothing more than occasional harvesting. We replaced this flavor powerhouse with commercial bouillon cubes full of artificial ingredients and preservatives. It's like trading a professional chef who works for free for processed convenience foods. Technically, both provide flavor, but the quality difference is enormous, and Vikings had figured out how to grow their own gourmet seasonings that also improved their health, all without any maintenance. Wild celery, Apium graveolens, the self-sufficient wetland wonder. Here's where Viking agriculture becomes fascinating. They were cultivating original wild celery Apium graveolens, and archaeological findings from Danish settlements like Hedeby and Viborg confirm this cultivation occurred over 10 centuries ago. This wasn't the watery, flavorless celery stalks familiar today. This was celery with substantial nutrition and intense flavor that grew itself in wetland areas. This fragrant plant, from the Skirret family, originates in European wetlands, and Vikings primarily valued it for nutrient-dense seeds and leaves rather than stalks. The seeds provided powerful seasoning for broths and stews, delivering concentrated flavor that modern artificial seasonings attempt to duplicate but never match. Leaves and root portions enhanced stews as both flavoring agents and medicinal ingredients. What made wild celery perfect for zero-maintenance Viking gardens was its natural habitat preference. This ancient variety was remarkably cold-hardy and drought-resistant, thriving in Nordic marshes and wetland edges where modern vegetables would perish. Vikings simply identified where wild celery grew naturally and harvested it, or they transplanted it to convenient wetland areas near their settlements, where it would continue growing without any care. The plant is a biennial that self-seeds readily, meaning once established in suitable wetland habitat, it maintains itself indefinitely without human intervention. Vikings had homegrown flavoring that could survive anything nature threw at it, growing in marginal wetland areas that couldn't support other crops. What we did was replace this hardy survivor with modern celery, that is mostly water, and needs perfect greenhouse conditions to grow. The old varieties, including leaf celery and celeriac, fell from favor as true stock celery became popular. Today, most cooks don't even know these original varieties exist except in specialty gardens. It's like trading a wolf for a poodle. Technically the same species, but completely different capabilities. Angelica, Angelica, the perennial scurvy fighter. Next comes a plant so precious that medieval Icelanders actually criminalized stealing it from your neighbor's garden. Angelica, known to Vikings as Vun, wasn't merely another herb. This imposing plant, with its distinctive umbrella-shaped flower clusters, functioned as the multi-tool of the medieval garden, and it returned year after year without replanting. Archaeological locations in Norse settlements, like Hedeby, contain abundant Angelica seeds and pollen, demonstrating that Vikings maintained entire Vangardar, dedicated Angelica gardens. A 13th century Icelandic statute explicitly forbade stealing Angelica from someone else's garden, which reveals precisely how valued this plant was. Picture contacting law enforcement today because someone pilfered your parsley. That's how crucial Angelica was to Viking society. This towering umbelliferous herb offered protection against something that claimed sailors' lives for centuries: scurvy. Nearly every portion of the plant served a purpose. Vikings utilized the young stems and roots as vegetables, the seeds and leaves as sweet seasonings with an anise-like taste, and the entire plant for medicinal purposes. What made Angelica perfect for zero-maintenance cultivation was its perennial nature and ability to self-seed. Plant it once in suitable conditions, and it returns year after year, often spreading through self-seeding to create permanent colonies. The plant demonstrates extreme cold tolerance and flourished in Norse gardens, where other herbs would freeze. Icelanders continue making tea from Angelica seeds today and employ the leaves to flavor fish, preserving a tradition spanning over a millennium. Medieval documentation even considered Angelica a plague treatment, though we understand now that its genuine value lay in its substantial vitamin C content. This made it extraordinarily valuable for extended sea expeditions when fresh vegetables were impossible to preserve. Vikings had resolved the scurvy problem centuries before the British Navy discovered that citrus fruits could prevent it, using a plant that grew itself without any maintenance, common sorrel, Rumex acetosa, the perennial lemon tree. Before Vikings had access to lemons, they had common sorrel Rumex acetosa, and the linguistic evidence proves how important this plant was to Norse cuisine. The fact that the Sami people borrowed their word for sorrel from Old Norse shows. This tart perennial was a crucial part of Viking food culture, and it required absolutely zero maintenance once established. The lemony leaves were added to soups and sauces exactly like we use lemon juice today, providing the sour flavoring that made bland winter foods edible and appetizing. Vikings understood that sour flavors not only improved taste, but also provided crucial vitamin C that prevented scurvy and other nutritional deficiencies. What made sorrel absolutely perfect for zero-maintenance gardening was its perennial nature and incredible reliability. Sorrel is one of the first greens to emerge in spring, arriving exactly when fresh vitamins were desperately needed after long winters of preserved foods. The plant regrows quickly after cutting, providing a continuous supply of tangy seasoning throughout the growing season without any care from gardeners. It's basically a renewable lemon tree that thrives in northern climates where citrus cannot survive. The high vitamin C content made sorrel especially valuable for seafaring communities that needed protection against scurvy during long voyages. Vikings had solved this nutritional challenge centuries before other maritime cultures figured out the connection between fresh vegetables and sailor health. The plant spreads through both seeds and underground rhizomes, creating permanent colonies that expand year after year. Once established, sorrel requires no watering, no fertilizing, and no replanting. It simply returns every spring with abundant, tangy greens that provide essential nutrition. As trade routes brought imported citrus fruits to northern Europe, sorrel gradually lost its culinary prominence. Despite being perfectly adapted to northern growing conditions and requiring zero maintenance, ramps, Allium trichoccum, the self-spreading flavor bomb, now comes a plant that modern foragers pay premium prices for at farmers' markets, completely unaware that Vikings were cultivating it in their gardens over 1,000 years ago. Wild leek Allium trichoccum, known today as ramps, was so valuable to Norse settlements that they established entire garden plots dedicated to this pungent bulb that spread itself without any human help. Recent archaeological analysis of soil samples from Greenland Viking settlements has revealed allium pollen and bulb fragments, proving that Vikings weren't just harvesting wild ramps, they were actively cultivating them. This makes perfect sense when you understand that ramps provide intense onion garlic flavor that could transform bland, preserved foods into something actually edible. What made ramps absolutely essential for Viking communities was their timing and self-sufficiency. These plants emerge in early spring, exactly when stored onions and garlic from the previous year were running out or had spoiled. Vikings could harvest fresh, potent flavoring just when their food was becoming monotonous and nutritionally deficient. The bulbs could be pickled or dried for later use, providing year-round access to this concentrated flavor. But here's what made ramps perfect for zero-maintenance gardening. They're perennial plants that spread through underground bulbs and self-seeding. Plant them once in suitable woodland conditions, and they naturalize easily, spreading to create permanent colonies that produce food for generations without replanting. The plants prefer shade and moist soil, thriving in forest edges and woodland areas where other vegetables won't grow. Modern restaurants charge premium prices for ramps during their brief spring season, treating them like exotic delicacies. Meanwhile, Vikings had figured out how to cultivate reliable supplies of this gourmet ingredient in their own gardens, where the plants spread themselves and required absolutely no maintenance beyond occasional harvesting. Pignut, Conopodium majus, the hidden perennial treasure. Let's discuss a vegetable that proves Vikings knew exactly where to find hidden treasures in their landscape. Pignut Conopodium majus conceals sweet, crisp tubers underground that taste like a cross between potatoes and hazelnuts. And once established, these perennial plants return year after year without any human intervention. Place names across Norway still reflect Viking familiarity with jordnut or earth nuts. The small tubers, only 0.24 to 0.31 inches, 6 to 8 millimeters across, were eaten raw or boiled like tiny potatoes. 18th century accounts note that Norwegian children were still digging up these sweet tubers as snacks, and during World War I, they were even used as almond substitutes in baking. This tells us that knowledge of Pignut persisted in Scandinavian culture long after the Viking Age ended. Archaeological evidence suggests Vikings valued Pignut as an emergency food source that grew wild in forest edges and shady areas where other root vegetables wouldn't thrive. The tubers are nutritionally rich in fiber and starch, providing concentrated energy that was especially valuable during lean periods. What made Pignut particularly valuable for zero-maintenance food security was its ability to thrive in marginal conditions that would challenge other crops. Vikings could harvest these nuts from woodland areas without dedicating prime agricultural land to their cultivation. The plant essentially provided free food from spaces that weren't suitable for other vegetables, and it returned every year without any planting or care. The perennial plants spread slowly through tuber division, creating expanding colonies in suitable woodland habitat. Once Vikings identified productive Pignut areas, they could return year after year to harvest sweet tubers without ever planting, watering, or maintaining the plants. It's like having a secret stash of natural candy hidden in your backyard that replenishes itself every year without any work from you. Sea kale, Cramba maritima, the coastal perennial. Here comes a vegetable that proves Vikings understood how to turn hostile environments into productive gardens. Sea kale cramb maritima was the original coastal superfood that Vikings harvested from rocky shores and eventually cultivated in their seaside settlements, where it returned year after year without any maintenance. This isn't just another leafy green. This perennial plant, with large blue-green leaves and white flowers, thrives in salty, sandy soil that would kill most garden plants. Archaeological evidence from coastal Viking settlements shows they deliberately cultivated sea kale in their gardens, after discovering it growing wild along fjords and shorelines. What made this plant absolutely revolutionary was its incredible adaptability and zero maintenance requirements. While modern vegetables need perfect soil conditions, sea kale thrives in salty, sandy soil right next to the ocean, where nothing else would survive. Vikings could grow nutritious greens in marginal coastal areas without any soil improvement, watering, or fertilizing. The young shoots, traditionally blanched, are eaten like asparagus and have a nutty, slightly bitter flavor. The leaves can also be consumed, though they're tougher than the tender shoots. Vikings harvested sea kale in early spring when the shoots first emerged, getting fresh vegetables from coastal areas that couldn't support other crops. What made sea kale perfect for zero-maintenance Viking gardens was its perennial nature and incredible hardiness. Once established, the plant returns from its fleshy taproot every year, surviving harsh coastal winters and salt spray that would destroy other vegetables. The plant requires no care beyond harvesting, no watering, no fertilizing, no pest control, nothing. It simply grows in impossible conditions and provides food year after year. Modern gardeners have largely forgotten this remarkable vegetable, though it's experiencing a revival in heritage gardens. Vikings had figured out how to grow nutritious food in coastal areas, using a plant that required absolutely no maintenance and actually preferred the harsh conditions that killed other crops. Wild garlic, Allium ursinum, the woodland flavor carpet. Here comes a plant that proves Vikings understood forest gardening long before permaculture became trendy. Wild garlic Allium ursinum, also known as ramsons or bear's garlic, is a perennial plant that creates expanding carpets of pungent, edible leaves in woodland areas, and it spreads itself without any human help whatsoever. Archaeological and linguistic evidence suggests wild garlic was known and used by Vikings, with some sources indicating it may have been introduced to Finland by Viking seafarers. The plant's distribution in northern Europe and its mention in early medieval sources support its presence in Viking and Norse diets, likely as a foraged spring green that required zero cultivation. What made wild garlic absolutely perfect for zero-maintenance food security was its aggressive spreading habit in suitable woodland conditions. The plant grows from bulbs and spreads through both bulb division and self-seeding, creating dense colonies that expand year after year. Once established in moist woodland areas, wild garlic requires absolutely no care, no watering, no weeding, no fertilizing, nothing. Vikings consumed the leaves fresh in early spring, when they emerge as one of the first woodland greens. The entire plant is edible. Leaves, bulbs, and flowers all provide intense garlic flavor that could enhance bland, preserved foods. The leaves were eaten raw or cooked. The bulbs were used like garlic cloves, and even the flowers were consumed or used as garnish. Medieval sources confirm wild garlic was valued for both culinary and medicinal purposes, with King Charlemagne including it in his imperial plant lists. Foraging was the primary means of obtaining wild garlic, but Vikings also encouraged its growth near settlements by creating suitable woodland conditions where it would spread naturally. The plant essentially creates a self-maintaining garlic garden in woodland areas that can't support other crops. Vikings had figured out how to grow intense flavoring in forest edges and shady areas, using a plant that spread itself and required zero maintenance, just occasional harvesting of the abundant leaves and bulbs. Lamb's quarters, Chenopodium album, the self-seeding superfood. Now let's discuss a plant that's essentially quinoa's European relative, except it grows like a weed and requires zero cultivation. Lamb's quarters Chenopodium album is technically an annual, but it self-seeds so reliably that Viking settlement sites are filled with its seeds, proving this was a dietary staple that maintained itself without any planting from gardeners. This fast-growing annual from the goosefoot family was one of the original superfoods, except it grew without any cultivation and reseeded itself year after year. Vikings consumed the young shoots and leaves, like spinach, harvesting them throughout the growing season for fresh greens. The protein-rich seeds were ground into flour, providing high-quality nutrition that matches modern quinoa. Recent research has demonstrated that lamb's quarters contains more protein than cabbage, more iron than spinach, and more calcium than kale. Archaeological evidence indicates this plant was regularly consumed across Viking territories, with seeds discovered in food waste deposits and cooking areas. What made lamb's quarters perfect for zero-maintenance food security was its self-seeding habit. The plant produces thousands of seeds that remain viable in soil for decades. Once established in a garden area, lamb's quarters returns year after year without any planting from gardeners. It's basically a self-maintaining food system that volunteers to feed families generation after generation. The plant grows rapidly in disturbed soil, often appearing in garden areas without any planting. Vikings recognized this as an advantage rather than a problem. They had a nutritious vegetable that planted itself and required no care beyond harvesting. What makes this especially ironic is that lamb's quarters is closely related to quinoa, which we now import from South America at premium prices. Meanwhile, this nutritious native plant grows wild across North America and Europe, dismissed as a common weed by people who don't recognize its value. Modern agriculture has declared lamb's quarters a pest species, spraying herbicides to eliminate what Vikings considered a valuable food source. We pay high prices for imported superfoods while calling this nutritional powerhouse a weed and trying to kill it. Vikings had figured out that the best vegetables are the ones that grow themselves. Horseradish, Armoraceae rusticana, the indestructible perennial. Finally, we come to the vegetable that proves Vikings understood set it and forget it better than any modern appliance manufacturer. Horseradish Armoraceae rusticana was essentially the Viking equivalent of a nuclear-powered spice collection, and once planted, it provides a lifetime supply of preservative and medicine without any maintenance whatsoever. Medieval records and archaeological evidence demonstrate it was valued both as food and medicine, providing preservation capabilities that could extend stored meat's shelf life through long winters. The fiery white root was grated as a condiment for stews and sauces, delivering intense flavor that could revive your taste buds and clear your sinuses permanently. What made horseradish truly Viking-worthy was its incredible hardiness and zero maintenance requirements. This plant survives in growing zones 2 through 9, spreads by root division, and once established, provides a lifetime supply of preservative and medicine. Vikings could plant it once and have generations of flavor and food preservation capability without ever replanting or caring for it. The plant is virtually indestructible. It tolerates poor soil, drought, neglect, and harsh winters that kill other vegetables. In fact, horseradish is so hardy that modern gardeners often struggle to eliminate it once established. Vikings recognized this as a feature, not a bug. They had a plant that would survive anything and keep producing intense flavor and medicinal compounds year after year without any work. Medieval doctors prescribed horseradish tea for purifying blood and calming stomach problems, understanding its medicinal properties long before modern science identified the compounds responsible for its effects. The plant's antimicrobial properties made it valuable for treating colds and digestive ailments in communities without access to modern medicine. Most modern gardeners buy jarred horseradish instead of growing this virtually maintenance-free plant. It's like buying bottled water when you have a perfectly good well in your backyard. Vikings had figured out how to grow their own preservatives, flavor enhancers, and medicines all in one indestructible plant that required absolutely zero maintenance once established. Conclusion: these 16 vegetables represent more than just Viking gardening knowledge. They're a complete food security system designed for people who understood that the best crops are the ones that grow themselves. While modern gardeners spend every weekend weeding, watering, and replanting, Vikings had figured out that perennial and self-seeding vegetables provided superior nutrition without endless labor. Start with 2 or 3 of these set-it-and-forget-it crops and experience the food security Vikings mastered over 1,000 years ago.